Thank you. Yeah, as you see, I prepared this talk with André Schmilion, and I have to send out my thanks to him because he's actually the person who brought me here and had this idea to present this talk at this conference, but he couldn't be here, so he sends his warm regards and wishes me luck for this talk. And André's background is in ethical robotics and AI ethics. So he's doing his postdoc at the Adam Mickiewicz University in Potsdam. Yeah, when you talk to school children in Germany, they will too often agree to the verdict that school is boring. And when you talk to the same children and ask them a little bit further, then they will also say that school should be intellectually stimulating and engaging and be interesting. So it seems that, so it's obviously children want to learn and they are intrinsically motivated to learn, but the school too often fails the intellectual needs of the children. Oh, sorry. So the problem I'm presenting here is actually school is boring. And my practical goal with this talk is make school more interesting. And my hypothesis will be that AI as a topic does make school curricula more creative and interesting to students. So we can ask, why should it be so? Why is AI interesting to children? And of course, AI has been associated with science fiction and with robots right from the beginning. And children are fascinated by the idea that one could have an artificial companion. However, when we take a more professional look at artificial intelligence, then we see that AI can be boring too. So, especially when you have these fantastic fantasies. And yeah, and not everybody finds that exciting. AI has to do with data sheets and with code and with algorithms, and not everyone finds that exciting. So there is a risk that if you want to bring AI into schools, that an exciting topic will become boring. And not because it is difficult to learn, but because it is taught in school. Schools have a risk to suppress the motivation to learn. What motivates us to learn so the next question would be, what motivates us to learn and master a difficult subject? And there are a few candidates where we can say where this motivation comes from, and this would be curiosity or serendipity or intellectual stimulation, the joy of solving difficult problems, and the feeling of self-efficiency, of mastering things. This is what keeps us motivated to even learn difficult tasks. But we know that schools have this motivation to suppress all these powers for learning. And I could not resist to quote Albert Einstein here. And he says, "It is, in fact, nothing short of a miracle that the modern methods of instruction have not yet entirely strangled the holy curiosity of inquiry. For this delicate little plant, aside from stimulation, stands mainly in need of freedom. Without this, it goes to wreck and ruin without fail." So Albert Einstein also knew this phenomenon that even fascinating subjects can become boring when they are taught in schools, but there's still this little plant of curiosity which keeps us going. So, and I think to prevent this, to avoid this, we need to pay attention to the why question. And the why question, if we know the why, we know the purpose, we know what motivates our actions and our learning. So the question is, why should we learn or teach a particular subject in school? And I think we often neglect this question. And when we neglect this question, we also neglecting everything, the motivational aspects and everything that has to do with learning and intelligence. And then learning becomes boring. And on the other hand, when we focus on motivation, even boring topics become exciting. So to achieve motivation, learners, teachers, and policymakers also, they need to know the why. Why should we learn or teach a particular subject in school? And if we think that AI should be taught in school, if we think that AI can make school curricula more intellectually stimulating, then we should have a good answer to the question of why we should teach AI in school. In recent years, there have been a number of private and academic initiatives calling for AI to be taught in schools. Famously, David Turetsky and Christina Gardner-McCune and others started the AI for K-12 initiative. So K-12 is primary and secondary schooling. And they formulated 5 big ideas in AI, and these are perception, representation and reasoning, learning, natural interaction, so this means interaction with robots and AI systems, and the societal impact. And they formulate for each of these 5 big ideas guidelines for each school level, for each grade, which should be learned in school. And in their paper, they conclude with a call to action for the AI community to make their research accessible to students. And which I think is important because the AI community should communicate their research to the public and make it more accessible for teachers and students. And there's another initiative, it's called the AIforall.org. It came from a summer program for high school girls, and it aims very much for gender and diversity in computer science. It provides teacher resources and focuses on social impact, ethics, and interdisciplinary uses for AI. So this would be another example how AI goes to school. Martin Kantelhofer and Gerald Steinbauer, they provide an overview of relevant scientific venues, journals, projects, and so on in the context of AI K-12 education. And they also argue that it is essential to introduce fundamental concepts and techniques of AI from an early age, literally from kindergarten to university level. And they give several examples of how AI is implemented in school teaching. They highlight a number of grassroots initiatives that practically prototype experiments. So you're experimenting with AI in school. And this can be, for example, with robots or with pencil and paper approaches, so it's offline coding. But they also show their formal offerings, like Australia, Singapore, South Korea. They created curricular specifications and guidelines on how AI can be implemented in schools. So, and this is an example from Germany. KI macht Schule, KI goes to school, you could say, and it's initiatives by students and PhD students to teach AI in schools, and they make courses, and it's a growing community, and there's a lot of enthusiasm in the field, in this community, to do AI practically in school and learn about it. So I myself also very enthusiastic when it comes to bringing AI into schools. Tim Pulver and me, Tim Pulver, he's an interface designer from the interface department of our university. We constructed a prototype of a AI of a toy with which you can interact with an artificial intelligence. So what you see here is it's a cube, and the cube has a camera inside it, and inside of this cube there's a little computer, and there runs a RNN, a neural network. It's based on ImageNet, and you can train this model, this pre-trained model, on any object or any scenery, and so that the image is associated with a certain class. So, and to make it more practical, you see that there's a second cube, and they are connected via an MQTT protocol. It's an IoT protocol, and so whenever the cube is in front of the camera, then it will light up in the green color, and when the pyramid is in front of the camera, then it will light up, I think, in the red color. So, and you can change this how you like. You can even make a picture of your face, or, for example, you can differentiate between you have your mask on or your mask off, and you can all kinds of stuff, what you can also do with any other AI system. And here's now we take this a step further. You can also associate the class, of course, with a switch. So you're just switching things on and off. And in this case, when the cat is in front of the camera, the switch opens a gate, a toy gate, so you can put the cat inside, but it won't work with a unicorn. But of course, you can train it all the other way around. And this cube, the vision cube, what you see in the middle, it has also a button, and you can make tabula rasa again and then train it from new. So it's really practical. We did some research already with children, where we experimented with children, and they immediately start to understand what it does, and you quickly see what are the possibilities of such a system, but also you see where its where its boundaries are. So so as I said, there's a lot of enthusiasm and a growing community, and many who work pedagogically with children would emphasize that AI is fun and inspiring for kids. And what most practitioners in schools see is that the kids love it. So children like to create projects, and they like to do AI. It makes school less boring, more interesting, and it seems almost redundant to ask why we should teach AI in school. It makes school more interesting, and it is a meaningful activity. But of course, it is a meaningful activity, but if the method of instruction is state of the art. So of course it should be project-oriented, interactive, social, and so on. But then when you do it in that way, when you apply these methods of teaching, AI as a topic does make school curricula more creative and interesting to students. But I think there's also a deeper reason why AI is special for teaching in school. And AI and developmental psychology, they are closely interrelated. You could say there's even a discipline, it's called developmental AI. And and also children's reasoning can be explained with machine learning models. There's a huge field of research done famously by Alison Gopnik, and they use Bayesian classifiers, decision trees, and so on to explain children's reasoning. And it's a very interesting field. And on this picture, you see Seymour Papert. He's a famous, or he was a famous computer scientist, but also a pedagogue. And he had this idea that computers are actually children's machines. So when we build our computers and machines in a way that children can easily interact with them on this computational level, then it's a tool for creativity and for interesting projects. And they built a robot that's called the Turtle, and with a simple program you can program this turtle, and it drives around and it paints on the floor, and it makes fantastic pictures. And today, if you start a computer course on coding, and for example Python, you can download the turtle and then install the turtle, and then you can do it also on your computer. And this is it's nice to do it. So I think there's some speciality about AI and computer science in general, but AI specifically. And so it's a meaningful activity in school. If children learn about AI, they learn also about cognitive processes, about their own cognitive processes, and they are engaged in creative activity, but also in a kind of meta reasoning. So for me, it's pretty clear why we should teach AI in school, from a practical point of view, but also from a cognitive point of view. But what Andre and me, what we did, we were interested, how is it actually justified in the literature to teach AI in school? How is this question answered, why we should teach AI in school? And what we did, we collected many research papers on this topic, and we checked them for their types of argument. So we made basically a list, and we categorized the arguments. And what have all these authors to say why we should teach AI in school? And we found there's a wide variety of arguments, and the arguments are also sometimes mixed together. But there are two arguments, they show up almost in every paper and on every website. And I will show them to you. So the first answer would be, yeah, we should teach AI in schools because we live in a world where AI is ubiquitous. And students need to understand the world they live in. And the second would be, we should teach AI in schools because AI will become even more important in the future, and students will later in life find well-paid job when they acquire AI skills today. So, in fact, it is very likely that when you ask a random person why we should teach AI in school, that you will get one or both of these answers. And just for the fun of it, I prompted the GPT-3 engine. And why should we teach AI in school? It's interesting. You can play around now with GPT-3. And GPT-3 answered, the great oracle of our time. There are two main reasons for doing so. First, we are living in an age of great technological disruption with artificial intelligence and machine learning at the forefront. It is crucial that students understand the implications of these technologies, as well as the societal and ethical questions that they raise. And second, there's a huge demand for AI skills among industry employers. So on the first look, these arguments seem convincing. They sound good. And who wanted to deny that children shouldn't understand the world they live in and shouldn't find well-paying jobs later in life? But when you take a closer look, you will find out that these arguments are not very good. They are even faulty. The fallacy these arguments fall prey to is called the is-ought fallacy. It was famously described by David Hume. The is-ought fallacy says that you cannot deduce from an it an ought. So you cannot conclude from the fact that AI is everywhere that AI should be taught in school. And the future argument, I think, is even more problematic. You cannot conclude from a vague prediction about the future what should be taught in schools today. And Joseph Weizenbaum, the famous computer scientist, he makes actually the same point in one of his books, and it's somewhat modified but still related to computers. And Weizenbaum says, it is often said that the computer is everywhere today, and young people must know what they are confronted with in the world. And therefore, it is necessary that schools teach something about the computer. But there are other things that are all over our world that we just don't feel like we need to take time into school to teach about. And this is exactly what I'm aiming here. This is my main argument. First, it's easy to logically fix these arguments. And to do so, we first need to bring them in an order or in an argumentative scheme. And every argument can be considered as an answer to a why question. So we ask this argument, why should we teach AI in school? And this is how the way we fix it. There's a normative premise in the future. We need everyone to be able to do AI. So this normative premise is mostly left out. And then there's a descriptive conditional. If we teach AI in schools, then many will be able to do AI in the future, and therefore we should teach AI in schools. And I think now this argument is sound. So it's not anymore this is-ought fallacy. But what becomes also obvious is that these arguments are trivial. The triviality comes from the fact that these arguments say nothing specific about AI. So you could replace the word AI with some other topic, and the conclusion would still be true. And we can only save this argument from triviality when we ask another why question. And so there's a second level why question where we actually put the normative premise into a why question. So we ask, why do we need everyone to be able to do AI in the future? And why should children understand AI technology today? And at this point, it gets obvious when we when we answer these two questions with because we need AI-skilled employees in the future, and because AI is everywhere, that's trivial. It's not relevant. And of course, we don't know what kind of AI skills will be needed in 20 years from now, and there will surely be jobs which will not be replaced by an AI and which will rely on human intuitive and social skills. So AI is not specific enough. Moreover, I do believe that these answers increase the risk that AI becomes another boring topic in school. And the reason why I believe this is that these answers are not very motivating. They provide an extrinsic motivation, not an intrinsic motivation. So employers maybe need the AI-skilled workforce, but this is not why I am doing AI. So it's too easy to disagree with. And we could just point out to the fact that that there are also other jobs in the future which will not be AI-related. And also it's just not true that AI is ubiquitous in that sense, because there are so many things you can do today which are not, which doesn't mean you are interacting with an AI. So if it is our goal, and if we think we should bring AI into school, then we should find a better answer to these questions. And how we can construct a better argument. And so we take these two second-level questions and try to find an answer. So I didn't construct really now an argument, but what it should be clear that we should find a normative premise which is more general, which is more based on human values. And I formulated these two normative premises to answer the second order why question. We should strive for a future society in which our actions in our private and professional environments are based on both reason and empathy. And we should maximize, and the second would be, we should maximize children's freedom and their sense of self-efficiency. So these premises are based on values, on ethical values. And so now you can ask, what has this to do with AI? And in fact, not so much, because there are other things in the world which we could do, and we would also come to these premises. Yeah. But this is because we haven't defined AI yet. So we haven't not defined what is actually meant by artificial intelligence. I mean, I did it a little bit when I showed this cubes, and okay, it's a recurrent neural network, but okay, that's one aspect of AI. So we need to define artificial intelligence, and then when we do this properly, I hope it will unfold why we should teach AI in schools. And so I tried some definitions of artificial intelligence. And the first is AI is problem solving. And I think this is the earliest idea of doing AI. And this is also reasonable to do this. When we teach AI in schools as problem solving, we teach problem solving, and these are, for example, puzzles and riddles and games like chess and Go, and you have a clearly defined problem and you aim for an algorithmic solution. And you can do this with computers, but you can also do it in your mind. And if we teach that in schools and make explicit that a lot of current AI is just that problem solving, then children will not only understand today's AI better, but also experience self-efficiency and maximize their degrees of freedom. It is motivating because you have this feeling of self-efficiency. And in fact, our whole curriculars are based on this paradigm of problem solving. So that's actually the competences they should learn according to PISA. But the second definition of AI is building friendly robots and smart and helpful gadgets and doing art. This is also artificial intelligence. And when we teach AI in school, we will teach tinkering with electronics and with creative materials. We will do creative projects with children. We will produce meaningful artifacts. And just as an example, I don't have a photo, but an AI-based, Berlin-based AI company, they developed a toy for kindergarten children, where kindergarten children, they explored different filters for paintings in a machine which they can interact with, and then they start painting their own pictures, and they can also put their pictures inside of the machine, and it will generate new filters, and it's a creative tool for kindergarten kids. So, and the third definition, AI is a discipline in the science of the human mind. You could call it cognitive science or epistemology, whatever. And as we know, it has a huge congruency with these other sciences like epistemology, philosophy of science, cognitive anthropology, neuroscience, developmental psychology, and so on. And the common question these disciplines are interesting in itself. It's good to talk about these questions. And children, actually, in any stage of their development, they love to discuss these questions. And if we teach AI as a part of this science of human thought in an intellectual, honest, and interesting way, we enable children to come up with new ideas and inventions, and this will help to solve the complex problems. And so actually what I'm saying is when we teach AI as a discipline of human thought, you teach thinking. And the fourth definition is AI is automated decision making. I didn't know if this was the word for it, but what I mean by that is, of course, it has to do a lot with mathematics, and you need to have some understanding in logic and computational logic and proof theory, probability theory, Bayesian inference, information theory, statistics, data science, and so on. And some of these disciplines are already part of our math and physics curriculum. But they become more interesting when we recognize how they are related to our thought, to our human thought. And also we see how our own thinking often differs from this ideal algorithmic thought because of our biases, prejudices, and our bounded rationality. When we teach these topics in school related to AI and to our own psychology, but also to other subjects like physics, there's a great chance that children start better learn to think about their own cognitive processes, and I think it's also good for society because when you're aware of your own prejudices, you fall less likely a prey to manipulation and disinformation and so on. And finally, I mean, I could find resources for 1 to 4, but I couldn't find one for the last one. AI is an operating system for society. I think it already is, and I think it will become. I think maybe it's the moment where we realize that it actually is. So the artificial intelligence runs the society in a way, so when we teach AI in school as a social science or as a political science, as an ethical discipline, we teach it as a part of a philosophical training, and I think we will increase the chance that we see the future. We'll see in the future also much better AI systems, much fairer AI systems, and because in school. What we are practicing in school then is to learn to reason and to emphasize. And I'm not so sure if I should still call this artificial intelligence. I would like to prefer more automated sapiency or machine sapiency. But I don't know if this term, we will use this term in the future. Artificial intelligence sounds more fancy, but but I do wonder if this is a fantasy or if we are really able to create it. And but I'm really pretty convinced that we should teach it in school, and because it forces us to rethink our practice of schooling as well, and also our practice in society. And if we do this from the perspective of the humanities, it will also change our way to think about school, and and I think we have to also change our curricula, our methods of instruction in order to teach AI in a reasonable and motivating way, and not in a boring way. And I would like to conclude with a question, with a question which is based on a thought by Joseph Weizenbaum. When he was asked if it would be possible to build a computer software which can reasonably be implemented in school, he replied, "The question is if it is possible to build a school system where a computer software can be reasonably implemented." So he turns the whole argument around, and I think we can take this thought to the level of society. Are we able to build a society in which we can implement artificial intelligence reasonably? Thank you.